You were held for the first time today. You will never remember it. Somewhere in a box or a phone folder, there is a photo of your first birthday. You are smiling. You have no idea why. This is strange when you think about it. You remember what you had for lunch yesterday. You remember your first day at a new job, the sting of a bad breakup, the smell of your grandmother's kitchen. But the first 2 or 3 years of your life, the years when your brain was absorbing more new information per day than at almost any other point in your existence, are gone. Not fuzzy, not distant. Gone. Scientists have a name for this. They call it infantile amnesia. And for over a century, nobody could agree on why it happens. Sigmund Freud was the first to give it a name, back in the early 1900s. He had a theory, and it was a strange one. He believed you didn't forget your early childhood. He believed you repressed it. In his view, those years were buried on purpose, sealed away, because they were tangled up with desires and conflicts too disturbing for the conscious mind to hold on to. For decades, this was the leading explanation. A locked door, not an empty room. But here's the problem. Freud's theory doesn't hold up under modern research, and the real explanation is far stranger than repression. It has nothing to do with what you saw. It has everything to do with what your brain was and wasn't built to do yet. Think about your brain in your first year of life. It is not a smaller version of your adult brain. It is a construction site. Neurons are firing and connecting at a rate of roughly 1 million new connections every second. Entire regions are still being wired, tested, rebuilt. And one of those regions, tucked deep in the temporal lobe, is the hippocampus. The hippocampus is your brain's filing system. It's the structure responsible for taking a moment, a face, a place, a feeling, and stitching it into a long-term memory you can retrieve years later. Here's the twist. The hippocampus is one of the slowest parts of the brain to mature. It keeps developing new neurons well into childhood, and some researchers believe that very growth is part of the problem. Psychologist Carolyn Rovi Collier spent decades studying infant memory, and her research overturned a major assumption. Babies do form memories. Even 3-month-olds can remember for a short time that kicking their leg makes a mobile above their crib spin. In her experiments, infants who learned this connection would still kick excitedly weeks later when placed under the same mobile. So the old idea that babies are blank slates, incapable of memory at all, was wrong. The memories are there. Briefly, what's missing is the ability to keep them. Here's why. Psychologist Patricia Bauer, who has spent her career studying how memory develops in early childhood, found something remarkable. Young children can recall events from their toddler years, but only for a while. Ask a 4-year-old about something that happened when they were 2, and they might describe it in vivid detail. Ask that same child the same question 5 years later, and the memory is often gone completely. It isn't that the memory faded slowly, like an old photograph left in the sun. It's that the entire filing system was still being rebuilt while those memories were being created, and much of what got filed was later overwritten or lost in the renovation. This is the part that should stop you. Your brain wasn't hiding your first steps from you. It hadn't finished building the shelf they were supposed to sit on. There's a second piece to this puzzle, and it might be even stranger. Memory isn't just about storage. It's about language. Psychologist Catherine Nelson proposed that autobiographical memory, the kind where you can narrate your own life as a story with a beginning and a middle, depends on something young children don't have yet. The words to organize experience into a timeline. A 2-year-old doesn't think in sentences like, "Yesterday we went to the park, and then I fell." A 2-year-old experiences the park, and the fall as fragments, sensations, emotional spikes, with no narrative thread connecting them, without language to stitch cause to effect and yesterday to today. There is no story to store, just static. So the memory isn't lost in a vault. It was never converted into a form your adult mind can retrieve. Does this mean nothing from your infancy survives? Not quite. This is the counterintuitive twist. While you cannot consciously recall your first 2 years, researchers increasingly believe those years leave a mark anyway, just not the kind you can narrate. Attachment researchers have long observed that the emotional patterns formed in infancy, how safe you felt, how consistently your needs were met, appear to shape behavior and relationships well into adulthood, even though the specific memories behind them are inaccessible. Your body may carry the weight of an experience your mind cannot describe. You feel the outcome without ever holding the memory that caused it. That's worth sitting with for a second. Somewhere inside you right now is the residue of a version of yourself who could not yet speak, could not yet reason in full sentences, and was nonetheless already being shaped by every hand that held you, every voice that soothed you, every moment you were left to cry a little too long. None of it is a memory. All of it is still, in some sense, present. And here's where this ancient limitation of the brain starts to look less like a flaw and more like a trade. Think about what your brain was actually doing during those forgotten years. It wasn't sitting idle, failing to record. It was in the most explosive phase of construction it will ever go through, building the machinery for language, for walking, for recognizing faces, for understanding that objects still exist, even when you can't see them. Laying down detailed, retrievable, autobiographical memories during that period would have required diverting resources away from all of that foundational wiring. Evolution seems to have made a trade. Give the infant brain everything it needs to build the tools of a mind first. Worry about the diary later. This reframes the whole question. You didn't lose your first 2 years. Your brain simply decided, without asking you, that building the container mattered more than filling it with contents you wouldn't be able to read yet anyway. There's something almost generous in that. Imagine if you remembered every fall, every scraped knee, every moment of infant frustration in full adult clarity, layered with the developed self-awareness you have now. It might be unbearable. Instead, your brain gave you a clean slate. A story that effectively begins somewhere around age 3 or 4. Once language, self-recognition, and a functioning hippocampus were finally online together. This is why, when you try to recall your very earliest memory, you often land on something oddly specific and strangely emotional. A kitchen, a dog, a particular blanket. Researchers who study these earliest fragments have found they tend to cluster right around the age when the hippocampus and language finally catch up to each other, roughly 3 to 3.5 years old, on average. Before that point, the story simply hadn't started being written yet. So the next time you look at a photo of yourself as an infant and feel that strange disconnect, like you're looking at a stranger who happens to share your face, you'll know what you're actually looking at. Not a memory that got erased. A version of you who existed entirely in the present tense, with no past to look back on and no future to plan for, doing the most important work of your entire life, building the mind that would, eventually, be able to remember anything at all. You were held for the first time today, and you will remember none of it. But without that forgotten moment, none of what you remember now would exist at all.